Hey, I'm Trevor with Maker Experiment, and today I'm going to show you how I made a sign for Kyle from RR Buildings. I started this project by laser cutting a template to make the outer frame for the sign. I then used that template and traced it onto some 3/4 inch baltic birch plywood to give me the center portion of the frame. I will also be doing this for the front of the frame as well as the back of the frame, but I'm going to have to do this one piece at a time and then stack them on top of each other. Now here I'm going to go ahead and cut out the inner part of the frame with my jigsaw. The reason I'm doing this is because I don't have a CNC machine, so I'm using the tools that I have on hand, being my laser, to get the perfect template in order to make the frame itself, and my jigsaw to cut out the bulk of the material. Next, I'm going to get out my router table and set it up to be able to flush trim this to the template. The first thing is to change the bit. Now, I got a new flush trim bit for this job because I didn't have the right size for my router table. So all I'm doing here is going through and installing that new bit, which is a 1/2 inch shank bit that's just a straight flush trim. Now, with this one, it's really easy to do. I just raise the router lift up, go through and install the bit and tighten it back down. And then once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the plate and then adjust the height of the bit itself to be at the top of the template that I'm making so that the bearing rides along that while it cuts the plywood. And that's all I'm doing in this step. Next is actually attaching the template to my piece. So in this case, I'm going to use painter's tape, and then I'm going to put painter's tape on both the frame itself and the template. Once the painter's tape is on, I'm going to go through and trim off the excess just so it doesn't get caught in the blade. Then I'm going to go ahead and take CA glue and spread it around the frame, add some accelerator, and then stick the template onto the top of the frame and align it and secure it in place. Once the template is secured in place, I'm going to go ahead and take it to the router table and start doing the flush trimming process. This is slightly time consuming just because I'm taking light passes and I'm making sure that everything is perfectly flush trimmed and everything else to the frame so that I'm not missing any detail. Now, this is a little time consuming, but I wanted to be safe and not do anything that was too deep of a cut and make sure that anything would be clean as I go through. I also went through, and if any painter's tape were to bind on it, I then cleaned it up as I went. I also did this for the front of the frame, attached that, and actually glued it all together, and then went through and flush trimmed that into place. And once that was flush trimmed, I went back through and actually cut out the center of the frame and with the jigsaw again. And this actually gives me the face frame, which will hold the acrylic pieces into place when I go through and make the actual sign. After all of the pieces were cut and ready, I went through and started priming everything, and in here I'm just using a filler primer, and then I went back through after sanding multiple coats and started to paint the actual frame. For this one, I'm painting the frame black, and then I'm going through and adding all of the acrylic pieces. Now this entire thing is an LED sign, so the backing is actually a translucent white acrylic, and then the logo pieces are going to be a red translucent acrylic and a matte black acrylic. To attach these, I'm actually using a double-sided 3M tape that is made for outdoor signage. Now this actually improves the speed of assembling all of this. I used to use an acrylic glue, and it could be messy and end up sticking my template down. And since I switched to this tape, it has drastically sped up the assembly process and has made it much cleaner to do and gives a much more refined look. Throughout the entire sign making process, this has got to be one of the most tedious things to do just because of all of the little small tiny parts that are included in the hammer design. And the tape actually makes these much more possible. They'd be a lot more difficult if they were glued down, and getting the pieces out could be slightly difficult. However, everything went pretty smoothly from this standpoint, and then it came to the biggest piece of all. So this piece is the main part of the logo from a size standpoint. It took up the most material, And here I'm just peeling off the backing of the double-sided tape and then sticking it down inside of the template. Now the template wasn't perfect just because I had already installed the red pieces and it kind of blocked the black piece from going in, but it all went together. Next, I'm actually going through and putting the sign into the frame and peeling off the paper that comes on the acrylic in the first place. And this has got to be one of the most satisfying parts. And then I go through and actually put little pins into the frame. So these are similar to the little black pins or framing nails that you see in normal frames that you can just bend. Then the last part of this was to install the LED lighting. For this, I actually used a double-sided tape that was from Amazon that was actually recommended by a friend of mine. And here I'm just sticking a piece to critical parts of the frame and going around little by little and sticking the lights down as I go, making sure that they're secure all of the way around. Now right here I'm only doing the outer border and then testing the LEDs to make sure they're all still working. I actually added a lot of LEDs later to the back piece of this frame to help light it up a lot better. There were a few spots where it wasn't being well lit, and doing this helped improve that. By far the most satisfying part of the job is actually going through and removing the paper cover on all of the acrylic. This paper comes on the acrylic from the factory, and it actually helps protect the acrylic overall. The only reason that I peel this off ahead of time is to make sure that everything looks okay in the end, that it all lights up well, and to make sure that there aren't any blemishes on the pieces. I could leave this on for the customer, in this case Kyle, to peel off, but it would be a lot of work for them, and I don't think that's fair to them to make them do that. Although it could be satisfying too, it just depends on who you are. Now, right here is one of the longer pieces to do, is all of the little parts of the hammers and the main portion of the logo. There's a lot of small little pieces of paper that have to come off. You'll actually notice that while I'm peeling the paper off, I'm actually using a small art knife that I used to use for paper cutting. So the blade is really small, it's kind of like an X-Acto knife, and I have to be really careful here not to scratch the acrylic. So if you're planning to use a knife, just make sure you're going at it from an angle and not trying to go straight at it, because this could cause scratches if you do it wrong. Once all of that is done, I get to light it up, make sure everything works, and check out the awesome sign. And that does it for the RR Building sign. If you like what you saw, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Hopefully you liked the whole process and me showing you what I did. Also follow me on Instagram at MakerExperiment, where I share progress of all of these projects. And again, if you like what you saw, follow along, and I'll see you next time.